Good morning, everyone. All right, so yes, I am Veronica Degraffenreid. I'm the Acting Secretary of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and I'm so happy to be with you today. Um, I want to say that, sometimes when I stand in this position, it is so surreal that I'm in Dallas, Texas, a girl from rural North Carolina, actually, talking in front of a group of scientists. It is absolutely amazing. My career path has been extremely surreal. You see, when I graduated from college, I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, go Tar Heels, and I wanted to go to law school. And I was going to be a children's advocate. I mean, that was, a very noble cause. But kind of life got in the way. I got married, I had children. I became a paralegal for a number of years, about 14 years. I worked for ultimately worked for the North Carolina Department of Justice, and we did complex litigation, including redistricting, redistricting litigation. And after a while, I decided that I didn't want to go to law school anymore, but I didn't want to be a paralegal. I mean, great career, but I wanted to do more. And because of the work that I did in redistricting, working with again, the North Carolina Department of Justice and the North Carolina State Board of Elections, this job opportunity presented itself at the state board. And I said, I know a lot about elections. I'm an expert, probably. I'll go work for them, right? And I became what was called an elections liaison. Elections liaison, whatever that means. And that was pretty much a catch-all for like whatever needs to be done when you're working with the counties. That's what your job is. Pretty much a lot about voter registration, how people vote, absentee voting, and just, over time, my job at the North Carolina State Board of Elections evolved so much that ultimately I became, I guess, the business manager for the state's voter registration and election management system. And in that, of course, I mean, we're managing voter registration and the tools that the counties in that state use for purposes of administering elections in that state. So I'm going to fast forward a couple of years because I don't want to bore you. But in 2000, so that was 2008 when I started working with the North Carolina State Board of Elections. Fast forward to 2014, I was promoted at the state board, which ultimately became the director of election operations, And I was giving this team of people that I had to manage. Now, I had done some management before of like a couple of people, but never just a full team of people that were actively engaged and working with North Carolina's 100 counties on elections administration. And part of the team that I managed were our help desk. And those were the individuals who were tasked with helping the counties learn and also the work that we did of developing the state's voter registration and election management system. So I explained all of that to kind of give you a little bit of really quick insight as to how I came to this space. So I am a process-oriented type of person, into the weeds, into the details. Like, I would never want anyone to give me anything to do and for me not understand what it is I'm doing, especially when I am being asked to sign off on change requests, right? So business person dealing with IT people, and they're saying, here's this document. We're going to make some changes. Sign here. Yeah, no, not going to happen. Not with me, not with me. So I spent a lot of time like really trying to understand what are these changes? What are these things that we're asking our counties to do? So when I took this new job or took the role at the time in North Carolina, I learned that our developers had developed a weekly GIS audit. And when I asked these group of people that I'm now managing, Like, what does that mean? What is this GIS audit? Even though they were the ones who worked directly with our counties on some of the technical components, they couldn't explain it to me. And I'm like, well, why are we doing this if we don't ourselves understand? So I took it upon myself to talk to our developers, talk to the IT people, and get a better understanding. Now, the thing about IT people is they are absolutely brilliant and smart, but they don't always have the right, I don't know, people skills, right? So although they had like put out like this 50-page, instructional manual, well, here's the data and here are the instructions. There you go, right? That didn't work for real people. It didn't work for the people, that I was now managing, and it didn't work for our counties. Didn't work for our counties. So I took it upon myself to kind of get a better understanding of like what this GIS audit was. And what I learned is that it was a tool that allowed our counties in North Carolina to see the addresses and how they were assigned to various election districts, including at the county level, at the precinct level, and for congressional and, legislative districts, and to compare that to where using GIS technology, the data or the layers indicated that these addresses should be. So it was an audit. It was an audit of the work that our counties did. So my next, task was, oh, well, that sounds great, but why do we need to audit it? So what are the counties doing, that needs to be audited, that's manual, that may not be, using GIS technology? Because to me, it's like, well, yeah, you should be using GIS technology anyway. Yeah, not so much, not so much. And so my team could explain to me what the state's geocode application was. And so the geocode application, long story, was the way that the counties would go in using street ranges or street segments, and they would say, okay, from 100 to 500 Main Street, it's in my county, it's in this precinct, it's in this congressional district, this, legislative district, all the way down to dog catcher, like putting in all of the districts. And they had to do that manually for all of the streets in their county, based on the segments or in the ranges, highly tedious. And I'm like, well, how do you even know? Like, as I'm talking to counties, we look at maps. Some of them would work with their local GIS experts, but it was a lot of manual work that was being done. And now at the state level, we use GIS technology or audits to, help the counties. And so when I started that work in 2014, and I tasked my team of like using these weekly audits, working with the counties. And amazingly, we had no pushback. Sometimes when you're the state and you're talking to, your counties, the locals, sometimes there's this disconnect between, big bad state asking counties to do something new and different. But this is the one exception that the counties absolutely embraced that work. So I explain all of that to show you that I am not a scientist. I am not a GIS expert. I just play one on TV. But what I do understand is the value of GIS technology and how it can be used successfully with respect to elections administration. So I wanted to explain that so that you would understand where I'm coming from and why this is something that is extremely important to me, because I know the value. And by the way, having been in elections administration since 2008, I very much understand, what are the practical implications of not getting it right when it comes to precinct assignments. It means ultimately that voters get the wrong ballot. It could be that they're voting for a contest for which they're not eligible, or they're not able to vote for contests for which they should be eligible. I am aware of isolated, elections certainly back in my old state that ultimately led to new elections because of voters being ultimately given the wrong ballot. And that's just because of the geocode or the precinct assignments. So again, I believe very strongly in the need to use, very precision-based tools as much as possible, right, with respect to elections. All right, so that's a little bit about my background, and let's jump over into the presentation. Okay. So here's the other thing. Not only am I not a scientist, I am not a history major. I majored in economics when I went to college. And so I'm going to give you the Veronified version of American history, civics, because it's important to understand this with respect to elections. Now, I am not trying to insult any of you. I know that you are brilliant individuals, but I bet that some of the things that you may have learned in 10th grade, 10th or 11th grade or 9th grade, when you took civics in high school, may not always be first and foremost in your head sometime. And that is across the board. I mean, there are elected officials sometimes, there are doctors and lawyers, I mean, all brilliant people who sometimes don't fully understand elections administration, and sometimes we have to remind them about government, a representative democracy, all of those things again that we learned back in high school. So I'm just going to really quickly take you back, because one of the other things that I had to do is in North Carolina, when we were modernizing the state's voter registration system, I had to talk to business analysts. And when you talk to business analysts, you have to explain the business. And so when I'm talking to them about precincts and polling places and precinct splits and vote and things, related to, election districts and civic boundaries, I would, their eyes would be glazed over and they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, okay. So we are going to have to go back and, really, hone in on American government. And sometimes the business analysts that I was talking to, they were not American citizens. They were contractors. And so I had to talk to them about American government. And so, I would do this spiel where I would say, okay, remember, couple of 100 years ago, some people from a different, part of the world decided to land in America, and they decided to discover some new land, and they took it over, and then there was a war, and then, there was a decision that we're going to, create this new country. And so the reason for that was, certainly about land ownership. It was definitely about taxation without any representation. It was about religious freedom. It was about independence, but really it was all about the land. It was all about the land and being able to stake your territory. So even the 13 colonies, right, at the creation was all about boundaries because of, there were a group of people who lived together and they wanted to be represented by where they lived or by the land. And so land boundaries, where you live, is very much the fabric of who we are as Americans and what government means to us in America. And so you have to understand that when we're talking about, of course, elections administration. So our first really form of government, because of, I live in Pennsylvania now, the birthplace of the United States Constitution. It started, really at the federal level. And so, yes, people were organizing themselves, locally and amongst their states. but it was really federal government. And so the Constitution started out certainly with, the president, US Senate, and Congress, right, in the early, form of our American government. And from there, it drilled down. States' rights were important. That's a part of the Constitution as well. And so states have, certainly governor, their council of state, and then they have their legislative branch, judicial branch, and, we can keep going down to state judicial. At the federal level, we do not elect our appellate judges in the U.S. Supreme Court, but certainly at state level, local level, we do. And then county government, those, political units that are, people are organizing themselves into because of where they live. And it keeps going to municipal and then other types of jurisdictions that most of the time is used for taxation purposes. A group of people living together within a certain boundary so that they can be organized so that they can be taxed, right? That is what American government is about. All right, so here's the other thing. Not only am I not a scientist, I am not a history major, I am also not a graphic artist. So, anywho, this is supposed to give a very simplified overview of what elections administration is all about. So I'm going to show this to you, and then it's going to come up again as well. It's going to come up again. So the way this works is that little green rectangle, a person's, where they live, their address, their place of domicile. If you expand that out, again, we go, that red square or rectangle, federal government, state government, county, local, right? Boundaries. These are boundaries that I'm talking about. And you drill down to a precinct. Now, a precinct is not a governing jurisdiction. It's not a civic boundary in the sense that it's a contest jurisdiction. It's really just an administrative unit for elections that is used to collect votes, right, at a precinct. And sometimes people use precinct analogous to polling place. A polling place, it depends on the state, but like in most states, your polling place is connected to your precinct. It's where you physically go to vote, but it's because that polling place typically, not all the way, all the time, is within the geographical boundary of that precinct. And again, your address, a person's address sits in there. So what does that mean for it in terms of elections administration? Well, in terms of elections administration down at the bottom of this is governed by federal law, state law, county board, typically administration. This is not always the case, but this is the perspective from Pennsylvania, where I work now. And then in terms of levels, precinct results, county results, the state election results will then dictate, who represents us because of the land that we live in, America, who represents us at the state level for, Pennsylvania now for me, county, and your various local governments. And then that other little blue box in the text in red, because I know I said that precincts are not really, contest jurisdictions. That's an exception in Pennsylvania where we do elect our precinct officials, which is very rare. We may be the only state. So all of that matters. And how do we get to this? We use all of that it dictates voter registration. It looks at the jurisdictions, the boundaries, that candidates come from these boundaries, all of them, Joe Biden, right? President Biden may have lived or been born in Pennsylvania, but he doesn't live in Pennsylvania now. However, Pennsylvanians got to vote for him, right? So, but candidates can come, depending on the contest jurisdiction. And then the blue, all the way down at the precinct level, ballots. Most of the time, you want election results by, based on the precinct, voting equipment, polling place, poll worker, poll book, poll watchers. All of these are those are processes right? There are so many processes, but what's important here is that there's a critical connection to elections administration and boundaries and where people live. All right, that was the point of all of that. Now I'm going to very quickly go through Pennsylvania government. Pennsylvania government. We have election districts, precincts, right? So I know some of you may refer to, like in your, regular voter life, your precinct, your polling place, but also in GIS world, the VTDs, voting tabulation districts. How many of you, at least to the ones who are in person with me, how many of you are going to be working at the state level or maybe at the county level on redistricting very, very soon? A few, okay, a few. So VTDs are basically precincts for the most part. Not always the case, not always the case. But that's generally, it's just an administrative unit of like collection of data, collection of votes. In Pennsylvania, precincts or election districts cannot be divided by, you can't divide census blocks. And also precincts require apportionment by local courts. And so that's going to happen right after all of the data comes out with Census 2020. And so that's a mess. Those are Pennsylvania's precincts. There are over 9,200 of them, I believe. And you can see, the dark, areas over there on the east and on the west. What are those? Can you tell me what area those are? Philly, Pittsburgh, right? Philly and Pittsburgh. And then look at all the other, right? So those are the precincts. All right, federal government and PA, just like everywhere, US president, of course, Senate, but in terms of districts, we have Congress. Pennsylvania lost population, so they're going from 18 congressional districts down to 17 once redistricting happens, okay? Those are the current 18. Look at like the land area in 15, right? So because of representation in America, one person, one vote, as you can imagine, very sparsely populated in 15 and 12, and like look at 16, that's Erie County all the way up at the top. And then you get something that's a little bit smaller, in the Philadelphia area, in the collar counties around Philly, and then, where Pittsburgh is, right? So that's why population counts matter, one person, one vote, American government. State government, governor, of course, state row seats in PA, those are at-large districts. Everyone votes, just like president and US Senate. But then districts for Pennsylvania, there are, I believe, 50 PA Senate districts, and I don't know, over 200 PA House of Representatives, right? We have a lot. And so let's look at, there we go. Those are our Senate districts, right? So again, look how teeny tiny those districts are in Philadelphia and then in the Pittsburgh area. And then those are the House districts. All right, judicial, I won't get into that. There are judicial districts and magisterial districts in Pennsylvania. I am not going to be able to show you a map for those districts because it doesn't exist. Does not exist. It's something that the state even is just now deciding that, yeah, we may want to do that. And so they're working with our local GIS experts in Pennsylvania to create a layer for that. And so, well, how do we handle it now? Our counties, they just kind of figure it out, right? So they're not using a statewide layer. But the judicial districts are not that hard. They're a whole county. And then there are a couple of judicial districts that are two whole counties together. Magisterial districts are components of precincts and wards, and those do get a little bit more complicated. And so at the local level, they're defined and managed by the County Board of Elections. And then we get local government, right? Local government, municipalities, municipal wards. So a municipal ward is some municipalities, it's how they govern themselves. So you could be the mayor of, a Philadelphia, but Philadelphia, the city of Philadelphia, is divided also into wards, right? And so it's council members are elected by ward. So some things are at large, meaning that everyone within the jurisdiction gets to vote for certain contests based on that governing jurisdiction. Other times there are election districts, even sub-districts within a boundary, and that's what a ward is. And then school board. So those are the civic boundaries in Pennsylvania. So why is this so important to talk about, right? Well, if you look at things, federal and state and local, okay, easy peasy, right? Well, some voters get to vote for everything and some voters don't get to vote for everything. Some voters only get to vote for that governing jurisdiction within the boundary of where they live. So how do county election officials do that now? Okay, those are the 2,200 plus PA municipalities. So how do we do that? How do we do it? Well, it's done through something called a precinct split. A precinct split. And there should be a layer. It does not exist right now in Pennsylvania. The precinct split layer does not exist, but it's something that we're working on. So what's the precinct split layer? So it's taking the state, the counties, and then the precinct layer and the congressional districts, the legislative districts, the judicial districts, the local districts like municipality and municipal ward, and your world, we're layering all of those things on top of each other. And when you get to, when everything is, when the union, right? I think that's the right GIS term. When that happens, and you have that smallest little polygon of where there are no more lines crossing through, that's a split. So what does a split mean in terms of elections administration? Well, ultimately it means that if every single contest was on the ballot on one particular day, one particular election event, everyone who lives within that split would all get the same ballot, because every eligible contest for which you could vote would be on that ballot. Now, we don't have, right? We do not have election events where every governing jurisdiction, every office is voting at the same day. So that we have general elections, municipal elections, special elections, different states, different rules in terms of government. But ultimately, at any given time, any given election, county election officials have to make sure that the participating contest that's on the ballot, that the people who receive a ballot, they get their correct ballot. And that's for everything. So the precinct split layer in PA includes, for the state, county, because people vote in their county. So county, precinct, municipality, municipal wards, again, all the way down to school board. All of those layers are important for purposes of elections administration. All right, here's another really bad example of me trying to create something graphical. So hopefully it makes sense. So when we look at this grid, now I showed you the map of PA. There is no county that is nicely divided into all of these nice, neat little rectangles, right? Doesn't exist. But in a perfect world, maybe it would look something like this. So this is showing you, this is a sample county, and this county is split between 2 congressional districts. So you see CD1, CD2, and it's also split between, you can't really see that purple line, but the purple line is going horizontal against the middle. And then there's some blue vertical lines, boundary lines. So those are Senate districts, and those are split between 4 Senate districts. And then on the other side, the green line, House districts 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the 80 represents precincts. It represents precincts. So I'm going to do some audience participation. So precinct number 26. Can someone tell me their eligible districts for precinct number 26? Who wants to go? Precinct 26. Which congressional district are they in? All right. Which Senate district are they in? And which House district are they in? Awesome. Now, if it was that easy, that would be wonderful. But what's not here? I don't have municipalities. I do not have judicial districts. I don't have other school board districts. And the lines are not nice like that. So what happens if someone lives on the border between 35, 36, 45, and 46? What do you do? Guess? You do your best. And that's exactly, they give an educated guess, right? Educated guess. And so in those cases, you know, the counties, and it depends on the county, right? Not at the state level. Counties are doing this work. You know, they may drive out there. They may work with their local GIS authority. Sometimes I have heard them tell me that they work with their local taxing authority. Is that the right authority when it comes to elections administration? Again, I'm questioning your understanding of civics in this country. Does it matter where they pay taxes? No. America stopped that a long time ago, right? Used to be white male landowners, right? They were the ones who could vote. We don't do that anymore in America. It's really not about where you pay. Now, talking to your local taxing authority, you know, could be helpful, somewhat helpful, but you have to be careful. I have been aware of situations, and I had to have really difficult conversations back in my old state when we started doing these audits, because we would find people who were not assigned to their right jurisdictions because my great-great-grandfather made an agreement, you know, with the county that the farm would be taxed because most of the farm was in Perquimans County as opposed to Chowan County, right? Real counties, real situation in North Carolina. The land was more so in Perquimans. The residence, the farmstead, was in Chowan County. And that was the county where that person needed to be voting instead of Perquimans. Even though it's possible that 911, the fire department or the sheriff from Perquimans may respond to an emergency. The residence was in Chowan. So where you live, your residence, your place of domicile dictates where you vote. All right. Okay. So just like in North Carolina, in Pennsylvania right now, our counties are not using GIS technology. They are doing it the old-fashioned way. They're looking at, you know, they may be using GIS technology at the local level for those counties that are you know, they're lucky enough to have GIS pros to work with them. Sometimes they may be using maps, old-fashioned maps. Sometimes, you know, they just know. So I showed you those, you know, the map of Pennsylvania, those huge counties, huge precincts, not highly populated. Their geocoding is not that complicated, not that complicated. In other parts, more so. But although we're not using GIS technology in terms of the elections tool in Pennsylvania, we will be very soon. And so, but let's talk about, you know, a voter registration database system. So when I started this presentation, I gave you some insight as to how I came before you today and became, you know, an elections expert with respect to using GIS technology and using the voter registration database system. The voter registration database system is certainly the list of registered voters, you know, in states, right? Every state has one. They're required by HAVA, right? The Help America Vote Act, except for one state that does not allow for, or they don't require voter registration. Does anyone, trivia question, know which state that is? You'll never guess. It's North Dakota, right? Okay. North Dakota. All right. So it is the list of registered voters. It is the system that is used to process voter registration applications. It's used to maintain, meaning when people are no longer eligible, they're removed or they're placed in their correct jurisdiction, right? It is the system used to process voting by mail, to configure poll books, precincts, polling places, voter history, and certainly it's used to manage precinct and jurisdictional assignments. So really that last item plays a role into everything that's in that list. Everything in terms of elections administration, because that's what government is. It's about where you live and it's about your boundaries. So that's what the VRDB, right? A little elections nomenclature there, VRDB, voter registration database. But typically it is a system with lots of different functions and applications. It does other stuff too. And even these things are related to geocoding, very related to geocoding. So why are we not using GIS technology in our VRDBs? Well, I don't know. So Pennsylvania will not be the first state to use a voter registration system. By the way, even though I was wrong, North Dakota, they don't allow for voter registration. I mean, they don't need to do, but they do have a voter registration system. And so their system uses GIS technology. So North Dakota, South Dakota, Washington State, Arizona, Wisconsin, there are other states that have done this. And so in North Carolina, it's used for audits. It's not yet in their VRDB. I tried really hard. Hopefully they're making progress there now. But in Pennsylvania, by December of next year, if we are so lucky, it will be in place in Pennsylvania. That's Cumberland County, PA. This is what our new system will look like, right? Using the application. So you'll be able to see the boundary. And so Cumberland County, aerial, or imagery, Cumberland County. That is a bunch of precincts in part of Cumberland County, PA. It is in the Carlisle, which is a municipality, and then they have, or a borough, right? It's part of the municipality. And then those 3-1, 3-3, those are likely wards, and that's how they've created their precincts. And so we can go in the new system, the counties, and here are the wards or the precincts, right? They will now see that layer in the new system. And as we keep going up with imagery, right? Now we get those little dots. That's what it comes down to. So go back to like what my little poorly visuals that I tried to put up, that's a better one, right? Because those are the dots within the boundary. And so if your dot is within the boundary, that dictates your split where you vote. Counties will be able to select a precinct, get information about that precinct. They can zoom in. They can see those dots going down the street. Okay. They can hover, get even more information about the address, right? So now they can click on the dot. And if they click on the dot, ultimately, they will also be able to see which all of the various splits, all of the various contest jurisdictions associated with that address. So the nice thing that they will be able to do, right, there's just more information. There are 2 people registered at that address. Okay, with imagery. Okay, more information. So this is the work. This is what GIS technology is going to provide to elections administration based on, again, the precision that's needed to make sure that the voter gets the right ballot and that the right candidate, prevails. Right, so more details are popping up for counties. And then they can start looking also, doing some analysis. So look at that line down the middle, right? We talked about that before in my little grid. Bunch of dots that are piled up on the line. Now, you know that sometimes the boundary line goes down the center of the road, right? So now it becomes important which side of the road the residence is on. With this new system, if the geocoding of that address is, if the county questions it or they believe it's wrong, they can move the point and they can place the point on top of the residence. Okay, just same thing. Okay, and then we can pull back out again. So GIS technology will help our counties be able to do their work with a little bit more precision, and especially like once we get into redistricting, they won't be able to do it next year when our congressional districts and legislative districts are reapportioned. But next time around, they will be. So we'll do the layers, and then the addresses will exist. They do have the ability to add addresses. I won't get into that because I know we're running short of time. But you can see, hopefully you can see how we will be able to use GIS technology to modernize elections in Pennsylvania. All right, so I'm going to go back to this image and show again, it's critical. GIS technology is critical. Where someone lives, where the boundaries are, it really does drive all the administrative functions that happen in elections administration. Where you live, where your address is, within the boundaries that are prescribed by law matters with respect to the work that counties do and the state does. Again, it's critical because it drives all of the functions of voter registration, of voting, polling place management, and ultimately election results. So in summary, the connections between voter addresses and civic boundaries provide the framework of how we administer elections, not just in Pennsylvania, but certainly in this country. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions. Thank you. All right. Oh, okay.
All right, at this time, if we have any questions from our virtual friends, we will open the table to them first. And if anybody in the room has any questions, you're welcome to come up to one of the microphone stands to ask them. So my question, I think I asked this when you presented at the a different forum. How do we get this message out to more secretaries of state?
Gosh. I feel like they know. I think they have a sense. I mean, we use GIS technology all the time now. I was joking with someone in the room. I'm like, elections will make, I'm a little biased, elections is going to make the work that you do cool. Well, he didn't like that. He was like, we have always been cool. I know. You became cool. You became cool with like iPhones, right? When people, they get it, right? Because people are using GIS technology every single day. I mean, we haven't always used GIS. It's been around, I'm sure, for a long time, but we haven't used it every single day. And now we do. I can't drive around anywhere without turning on my GIS. I mean, honestly, to get from the grocery store home is really sad. It's very sad, but I'm using my iPhone. And so I think in elections administration, especially, I know that in recent years, like 2016 elections, it was all about election security and Russia was hacking us. And, this past election, it was like, can we trust those, election results? Even though those conversations are happening, there are other conversations happening by elections professionals who do this every single day. And so their work is all about getting it right. They are professionals. And so they do a lot of work to ensure that they have voters assigned to the right district. It's going to come up a lot because of redistricting. So I believe that secretaries of state and you can get the word out to them yourselves. If you've seen something that I have talked about today and you want to know, well, how does it work in my state? You should reach out to, your state election leaders or your county election leaders and ask them what they're using. If you have some ideas about what the tools should be, absolutely. I mean, sometimes we don't know what we don't know, right? We don't know what's available. And now we have all of these tools available. And so it's learning. Even in Pennsylvania, I am learning literally every single day about what's available that could help with elections administration. It's all about just asking the right questions.
Thank you. I believe Frank has a question.
I do. Thank you. Wonderful presentation, wonderful insights. I'm thinking about the whole GIS ecosystem and the role that you play with that critical function, and things like when your election officials move that geocoded location, is there a feedback loop so that becomes the next geocoded location the next time? And also then it goes into our national address database and people find the grocery store better, so that whole, I invite your comments on that whole life cycle.
Right. Excellent question. So the thing is, there's this, and I think we talked about this, like there's this interplay between the data that's needed, that is used for elections administration, and then the data that's used for other purposes like taxation, right? So municipalities right now, they work with the governing body or the agency that does really municipalities in Pennsylvania happens to be PennDOT, right? And the municipal, but the work that they're doing, working with the counties, has nothing to do with elections administration. So when we use that map that I showed you, really came from PennDOT, and it's not right. We know that because their boundaries are very much created about taxation, and elections, two different things. So the other part of your question that is interesting is that right now, there's also modernization for E911, working with the Pennsylvania Election Management Agency. And so they too are geocoding addresses. We, at the state level, we've taken all of the voter addresses and we've geocoded them. So we've done the work. PEMA, they're working with the counties to get the geocoding, but we've already done the work. So E911, their goal is to get the fire truck or the ambulance to the residence, to the driveway, right? Elections, we need the point on the rooftop because we don't know where that line is going. So it will be, I don't know what the answer is about how it will evolve. Like if they're going to use our addresses, I would think probably so, because we get them to the door, right? If it's on the rooftop, but it's we're in this new world of modernization for so many levels, and so we don't know quite yet how this is going to work.
Good answer. I think we have time for one more question.
Just more of a comment. It was like how to get it more widely implemented. Once elected officials don't have reapportionment on the brain, and you tell them, well, everybody that will be able to vote for you, you'll be able to send flyers to just them. They really, really like it.
Yeah.
So as soon as they've got their area secure, I think they're going to be a big champion for it overall.
Yeah, when they and people like when they talk to each other, the other thing about this is that, you know, I mentioned some of the other states that have done this. I mean, it's, you know, it's bragging rights. Elections officials like data. They like pretty data. People like maps. Like, so once you start seeing what other states are doing, once they see the work that we're doing, and we're gonna, you know, strive really hard to make these, you know, make these part of our open data set, so that anyone can take these maps and do all types of wonderful analysis as much as possible, certainly without jeopardizing the, you know, the confidentiality and location of like where people live, right? In some cases, we won't be able to do that. All right.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much.
Just a couple of observations, couple of comments. So what you've done is you've taken one of the core basic tenets of our democracy and you've engaged it with our community. Why is that rare? You know, it's a really special thing that you've done, and you didn't just do that in a state or two. You're amplifying that voice nationwide. So you're making our work meaningful. If GIS works on my desk, that's only interesting. When it works on someone's desk that has a real job, like managing democracy, that's where it really scales.
Yeah.
So the work you've done is scaling nationwide. So we embolden you, keep that up, make more impact, leave the world a better place because your impact is scaled. So with that, it gives me great pleasure and my severe, serious honor to present you with the Distinguished Service Award from NSGIC for your work nationwide and letting your impact scale.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.